Alright, y'all, it's been a minute since I shot a history video, so today I'm going to do that. I did no research on this. This is completely 100% out of my head, so if I get anything wrong, call me out on it. I don't hate on people, like, helping me get my facts straight. I want to bring straight history, and, I want to do it right. So if I get it wrong, there's a million things that I need to know to do these videos, and I may get something wrong. So if I get it wrong, holler. And also, please go to YouTube and subscribe to The World According to Romance. Costs you nothing, takes me to the next level, and will eventually take you to the next level. You know what I'm saying? If you ever want to chill in a mansion with a rock star, you already are chilling with a rock star if you're friends with me. I'm broke, you know what I'm saying? Like, we can switch that around, and this could be parties every weekend, you know what I mean? We could do this every weekend like Puff Daddy or whatever. Alright, so today's show is going to be on, just wasted a minute of my time doing an intro. My name is Richie Romance. This is The World According to Romance. Today we are going to talk about history's greatest soap opera, and definitely, like, to me, the most interesting woman in history, Cleopatra. And just to start off with Cleopatra, just so you're aware, just to give you an idea of how old Cleopatra was, the last pharaoh. She was her dynasty. She was the last ruler in the 31st dynasty. This is something that started, Egyptian history officially. Dynasty 1 starts in 3100 BC, and now they're finding Dynasty 0, which goes back even further. She was Dynasty 31, okay, and she died, or Dynasty 31, and she died in, I think, 33 BC. She died like two or three decades before Christ's birth. And she was contemporaneous with Caesar, so we're going to get into all that. But anyway, like, Cleopatra is closer to us in time than she was to the pyramids or the beginning of pharaonic Egypt. Like, when the pyramids were built, there's still more time in between the pyramids being built and Cleopatra being queen of Egypt than there is time between us and Cleopatra. That's how old Egypt is, and it's old. Alright, so anyway, she is, the reason she came to power, a lot of people think she is a African woman, or that she is indigenous to Egypt. She's not, okay? This story starts out with Alexander the Great, who I did the whole series on last summer, crossing the desert of Egypt to try to get to the Siwa Oasis and find out if he's a god. And when he got to the Siwa Oasis, they said, yes, indeed, you are a god. You can be the next pharaoh. Well, Alexander the Great went on to the east and went to conquer the world, and he got killed, but he conquered the biggest empire ever, and when he died, his generals all fought for control of his empire. And a guy named Ptolemy, who was one of Alexander's greatest generals, won the best prize, which was Egypt. Egypt has the most bread, it has the most gold, the most treasure, the most history. Everything is in Egypt. Like, Egypt was the shit. So the Ptolemies began a dynasty that went unbroken between Ptolemy himself, Alexander's general, all the way down 300, because Alexander's 330 BC, he is I think he dies in 323 BC, where Cleopatra is living, like, her time is 50 to like 33 to 31 BC. So 300 years passed by in between Alexander and Cleopatra, and the Ptolemies ran Egypt the whole time. And it got to the point where, like, the first Ptolemy was good, and the next, he was a good administrator and everything. The next one kind of got worse, and then they started just like being rich boys who are ruling this and not even caring anymore. The Ptolemies, they only spoke Greek. They never bothered with the population of the Egyptians. They thought they were a bunch of peasants and ignoramuses and everything. There was one Ptolemy who he did nothing but play the flute the whole time he was king. There was another one who was, I think, Cleopatra's grandfather or great-grandfather. His name was Physicus, which means in Roman fatty because all he did was sit around and eat. So like these Ptolemies were like not really like kick-ass rulers. So, and now Cleopatra was not supposed to be queen. She was 19 years old. Her little brother was 13 years old, and he was going to be Ptolemy the 13th, and he was going to rule Egypt. Okay, and she was going to be married to him because in Egypt, you had to marry your brother and sister for the line of succession, and that's just how it worked. They believed in brother and sister marriages to keep it pure and to keep it, because it was somehow, being the pharaoh, you were a god, and it was twisted. But either way, so she's vying for power with her brother. Okay, and this is in about 50 BC. All right. Now, her brother was another typical Ptolemy who didn't give a shit about the Egyptians. She went a different way. She was very educated. This was not just a beautiful girl. That made it into the books of history and fucked everyone in her path. Like, this was an intelligent woman, bro. She knew like 8 different languages. She definitely was the only Ptolemy who not only learned Egyptian, bothered learning Egyptian so she could speak to her people. But that in itself is humongous, dude. Being able to speak, like, not knowing the language of the people you govern, it says a great deal. Knowing the language of the people, being the first person in your line who can speak the language of the people you govern, it says everything. She immersed herself. She was the only one of the Ptolemies to practice Greek, not just Greek religion, you know, Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, and all that shit, but she dipped herself into Egyptian religion, and she started calling herself the living embodiment of Isis. So she was hugely popular before she even became queen, and a civil war broke out with her brother before, you know, in Egypt proper, and right around 50 BC, in Rome, who already owned, as a country, they already owned Greece. Like, the only free Greek state left was Egypt, the Ptolemaic Egypts, or at least the free Greeks. There was one in Asia called the Seleucid Empire, but they were far to the east. The Romans didn't govern that. Greece proper, the Romans owned, and they wanted Egypt next. So along comes, fresh off his conquest in Gaul in 50 BC, Julius Caesar is now, he went back to Rome, he declared himself the emperor, and now he's running Rome as if he was the emperor, and he needed Egypt. He needed Egypt for its gold, he needed Egypt for its taxes, and most importantly of all, he needed it for food, because all throughout history, they keep saying Egypt was the breadbasket of the ancient world. It was just a lot. It's a big, huge river system, especially in the Delta, and there's tons of fields. There's just tons of things growing. The Nile floods every year. The Nile's one of the biggest rivers in the world, and it's a weird bird because most big rivers like the Mississippi and the Amazon have all kinds of little offshoots where the Nile is just one big street. It's one big lane most of the way, especially through most of Egypt. But it produces a lot of food. Caesar needed that. So now Alexander the Great started his own city, and that became the capital. It's called Alexandria. That Alexandria is at this point in history is the greatest city on earth. It's even better than Rome. There's more scientists there. The great library is there. The lighthouse is there. That's a great wonder of the world. There's just a renaissance going on of Greek thought and Greek philosophy. All kinds of Greek scholars are moving to Alexandria to be there. It really is a burgeoning Greek/Egyptian state that the Romans are about to take over and like make part of the Roman Empire. But it's not part of the Roman Empire yet because it's still run by the Ptolemies. It's still run by Ptolemy the 13th. And when Caesar gets there, he finds this civil war between Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy. The night that he got there, there was civil unrest, and where his quarters were in Alexandria, there was fighting going around all around the building. He had to have his soldiers ready at arms. And it was because Cleopatra was fighting against Ptolemy, and she was losing. Okay, she was not going to win this war. Well, somehow she was on a run from her brother. Her brother was controlling Alexandria, and she was outside of Alexandria. She had herself smuggled into Caesar's palace where he was staying, and was like, and in a carpet, and she had herself unrolled. And when she unrolled, she came out, and she was like naked. And, hi, Caesar, how are you? What are you doing here? Oh my God, Caesar! And lo and behold, somehow she seduced him. She worked her magic, and supposedly, like, you know, history paints her as beautiful. Now, from the ancient sources that I see and all the coins that I've seen her mint, she was not beautiful. Like everyone says, there was something about this chick. You just had the love, and it wasn't you know, outward beauty. She was okay. I think she was okay. She was aight, but like once she started opening her mouth, you just fell in love with her. She was one of them type of chicks. And I think this happened to Caesar, okay? Because Caesar would end up spending the next 4 years of his life in Alexandria and Egypt. And Cleopatra became his consort. Her brother was out of the picture. She became the queen de facto, if not in reality, then at least by name, in Caesar's words, of she was the leader of Egypt. He didn't just take over Egypt. He like let her have it. That in itself proves that he had a soft spot, because Caesar doesn't play. He would have easily just took Egypt, and probably should have. But anyway, he let her keep it, and he didn't own it per se yet. The Romans didn't. So yeah, and on top of it, like all the Ptolemies before Cleopatra, they only put their image on like $1,000 and $10,000 coins. Like they didn't have bills, they didn't have paper money, but the coins that were worth big money. That's the only thing you saw Ptolemies on. Cleopatra put her face on the penny, and she called herself the living embodiment of Isis. I don't know if I just mentioned that a minute ago, but that was music. Calling herself Isis was like music to the Egyptians' ears. That's what they wanted to hear. That's what they believed. This was all good for them. So Caesar ends up staying there for 4 years, and this kills it. He even brings Cleopatra back with him to Rome to show off to the people of Rome, and they did not like her at all, bro. She was a foreign whore. She was a harlot. A seductress. The whole idea that there's a woman who thinks she's a god and a goddess, and she's like getting into Caesar's brain. And supposedly, like, they took a pleasure cruise down the Nile, and she showed him all there was to see of Egypt, all the pyramids, all the temples, everything there was to see, all the animals, hippopotamuses. Caesar brought giraffes back to Europe for the first time after that cruise. But supposedly she got into his head, and she started really, you know, she kept gassing him up. You're a god. You're the living embodiment of Alexander. I am Alexander's heir. We should get together. They did have a baby. The baby was named Caesarion, Little Caesar. And shortly after that, and also when Caesar brought her to Rome, he also brought her little sisters in chains and paraded them in a triumph. Like Caesar, I'm telling you, the Romans are fucking nasty. They don't not play. But Caesar, like, this doesn't bode well in Rome, and he was already not liked because Rome, it was a republic. It was very democratic. We think of Rome as an empire, but at this point it was not an empire. They did not want emperors or kings. They wanted a republic, the way that America is about that shit. So too was Rome. Like, we're a republic. We have senators. We don't need kings. Blah, blah, blah. So they ended up, Caesar would end up being assassinated on the Ides of March, 44 BC, which left, and it was in the Senate by his own senators in a freaking toga, like in their business suits. And it was also, there was a religious element to it because it was holy, where they did their government business. Like, the gods were all part of it and everything. That's something we don't have in America. But anyway, Caesar had one of his greatest generals and one of his like next in line to run the empire was a guy named Mark Antony. Mark Antony was Diesel. He was good looking. He was young. He kicked ass. He was there for most of Caesar's great victories. He was the heir apparent in the eyes of the army. However, when Caesar died, he left nothing to no one at all except one person in his will, and that person was his great grandnephew, whose name was Octavian Caesar, a sickly, wimpy little child, brought up in affluence and, as a kind of a rich boy. But he would go on to call himself Augustus Caesar once Caesar died, and he claimed, once Caesar died, he said, well, if Caesar was the emperor, and now he's dead, and I'm his heir. Well, now I'm the emperor, and I'm going to take this. I'm going to take this by the balls here. So it didn't just happen overnight. It didn't just happen automatically. There were years of civil war, and most of the army was loyal to Mark Antony. Mark Antony he had a lot of things in the east, shit like Syria, Turkey, Greece. That's where all the treasure was. That's where all the culture was. Rome was in the west, and Octavian and Mark Antony kind of made a pact at first, where Antony gets the east and Octavian gets the west. Well, that was unadvantageous to Octavian. He didn't like that deal, but he kind of like got cowed the whole way, like for years, by Mark Antony. Mark Antony was like, "Fuck you, little bitch! I'm the emperor now." So what started out as Antony and Octavian or Augustus kind of like trying to work it out, it just didn't happen. Antony was kind of a dick. Augustus wasn't a walk in the park either. But somehow or another, Augustus solidified Rome. He stayed in the city of Rome, and he got the power of the people. He got the popular people behind, everyone behind him in Rome. Where Mark Antony was never there. He was always on the road in the east, and he had the armies at his back, but the people of Rome did not have his back. There were more and more, and also Antony started, like, little by little, he started dipping his claws into Cleopatra, and Cleopatra dipped her little claws into him too. Now, apparently, history paints it as, well, for Cleopatra, Caesar was the marriage of money, and then Antony was the marriage of love. I kind of think it's the opposite. Like, by this time, she doesn't really have money cards to play with. Augustus is going to come. Rome's going to take her power away. Her only play at staying in power was to go with Mark Antony. She really didn't have a choice. And when she got together with Antony, Antony was desperate. He's like, I need troops, I need food, I need this, I need that, I need money, I need money, I need money. And she's like, I got all that. I got food, I got troops, I got money, I got it all. And I'll get you back. But we're going to sign a little prenuptial agreement. And by this time, they'd been going out for like 2 or 3 years. She already was pregnant with one of his kids. It turned out to be twins. They would go on and name them. It was a boy and a girl. They named the boy Helios, the girl Selene, which is sun and moon in Greek. And that Antony would get Rome and all of the West. She would get all of the East, Egypt and the Near East, and her Caesarion would be the heir of the empire, Caesar's child, who was still alive. So Antony went along with all this shit, and, signed an agreement, and they became lovers. They really were lovers, and they were really infatuated with each other, and they kind of like dipped out on a lot of their duties because they were so busy having extravagant sex and just being lovers and living the lifestyle or whatever. Eventually, in 31 BC, it all comes down to a naval battle called the Battle of Actium. All right, where basically somewhere off the coast of Turkey, Octavian / Augustus's troops caught up with Mark Antony's troops, and supposedly Cleopatra was in the battle as well, and she dipped out. She evaded once they started losing. Antony got his ass kicked. Somehow he ran from the battle. His troops got decimated. He ran back to Egypt and went crazy, and that was kind of the end of him. He like died in the sand of in front of his palace, and the Romans came, and you know he was already basically the Romans were surrounding Egypt, and he was going crazy, and he like ran back to his girl, Cleopatra, where are you? Cleopatra, where are you? And some people say he killed himself. She didn't. They had a suicide pact. And she lived on. Some people say they both killed themselves. But apparently the way I get it is that he killed himself first. And then she like let the Romans have his body. But she holed herself out in her palace and did this big extravagant burial scene because she was the last pharaoh. So she had to make it look something worthy of a pharaoh, and she made this big huge burial for herself. And as the Romans were walking in, they saw her, and she put these she chose her method of death was the cobra, which is one of the, or the asp, one of those two snakes. But anyway, what was a symbol of the pharaoh. And if you wanted to do that, supposedly the neck or the wrist is the best way. Legend has it she put them up at her breasts, and that's let the snakes bite into her that way. But anyway, she committed suicide by letting a snake bite her, and she died. History tells us nothing of Caesarion or her twins from Mark Antony. When she died in 31 or 33 BC, that was the end of pharaohs. That was the end of over 3,000 years of Egyptian history. As pharaohs, it would now basically, once she died, it just became another state in the Roman Empire. It got controlled by Augustus and then all the subsequent rulers after him. And Cleopatra passes on the legend. Again, I think she's one of the greatest women in history. She's definitely the most interesting woman in history. I can't recommend delving into her enough. I'd done no justice at all in this video to her. My name is ROMANTZ. Have a great day, and no matter where you go, right there you are. Unnecessary beefs, more cows to breed. Peace, people.